there, this is Cassia.
And this is Brian.
Welcome to the Ebon, a podcast discussing Star Wars news and Knights of the Old Republic.
Spoiler alert for the Knights of the Old Republic series and the Star Wars films, TV shows, and all other media.
This is where the fun begins.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the Ebon podcast. Today we have an extra special guest with us. Coming back, he was in episode 59, talking about Kashyyyk and the Indigenous Experience there. Welcome back, Huni, to the podcast. Thanks for coming back on, and welcome. It's great to have you back.
It's great to be back, Brian. Happy to meet you. Happy to be back on the pod. And I was very happy with the last episode I was on, and I'm very, very happy that it got such positive feedback. I was expecting a little bit of negativity, but maybe that's just me being a pessimist and having gone to the States and done the interpretation over there for folks educated in the American school system and dealing with Indigenous history, which is, let's call it, abridged. But yeah, it's really, really good to be back. I'm very excited. And yeah, I love me some KOTOR, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Episode 59, that was back before I joined up onto the podcast. Yeah. So I was just listening to it as a, just an avid podcast listener, Ebon Hawk fan. So I have to say the episode was really excellent. It was really, interesting, educational, very important topics that people need to familiarize themselves with. So yeah, I was really excited when, Cassia told me we were having you back on to talk a little bit today about the Tusken Raiders. So.
Yeah, for sure. After our episode, I got really hyped and excited. And I think I messaged Cassie a good couple times, here's a topic here, here's this, here's that, I think we went back and forth about what I could do and what I could talk about coming back on the pod. So I'm really excited for this, for sure.
Yeah, I always kind of envisioned having you on again for talking about the Sand People in Tatooine, and it was just kind of like finding the right time because I knew it was coming. So it was just like on my short list of episodes, like Huni comes on to talk about the Sand People. So I really enjoyed having you on for episode 59. It would not have been as successful or as informative without you. So I'm thrilled to have you on again, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, no problem. I just hope I'm a little bit more relaxed this time. I listened back whenever you sent the copy, and I cringed. My whole head went into my shoulders a good couple times just listening to my voice. But yeah, so I'm excited still, for sure.
It happens to me too. Listening to episode 71, I'm like, oh, wow, okay. That is intense, and that one was hard for me to listen to, but you're doing great, and episode 59 sounded excellent. So,
thank you.
Yeah, that's right. We'll get through it together.
Right.
And now, anyone who hasn't listened to episode 59, you absolutely should, because as we've just mentioned, it's excellent and a really important episode. So definitely go check that out. But for anyone who hasn't listened to it yet, Huni, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about you, kind of your backstory, and what you have going on. We want to know a little bit more about you.
Alrighty. So side note off the top, I've been watching Mythic Quest, and there's a character in the show called CW, and his whole thing is talking about backstory. So the mention of my backstory, I just heard of you in my head. I'm very excited. Saguzalguego, Ali Huni Yungyats, Aguzatlono, Oguaho. So I am Ali Huni David. I'm from Akwesasne. I'm Wolf Clan, and I am a big old nerd, big old Indig nerd. There are many of us, they're hidden away. And yeah, I've made it a point to find many within my community and have a little D&D group with a couple of my buddies from back in the day. But I am an artist. I am a big old nerdy Indigenous artist. And growing up in Akwesasne, I've been enthralled and fascinated and obsessed really with the history, the legends, the tales, the lessons told by our elders. And this has been something that I've studied, loved, and really absorbed wherever I can since I was a kid. And whenever I was a kid, I would hear these stories. I'd hear these legends told by our elders, even if it was just, during Mohawk class, just one of our teachers just kind of, lazily telling the story after telling it 30 times. I would always see the images in my head. And I really feel like that without that, I wouldn't have become any type of artist, because just those pictures, those images, and the way that I saw each one of these legends playing out, those characters really stayed with me and, really influenced the stuff that I was into. So I was also a rowdy kid, and my father sat me down one day and threw Star Wars in front of me. And for an entire day, me and him watched A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back. And I think we got most of the way through Return of the Jedi and got a pizza. So yeah, that was my indoctrination into the way of the wars. And from there, here I am now, a big old native nerd doodling just like I have been since back then. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And your artwork is incredible. So anyone who's not familiar with your art should definitely go onto Instagram. It's at Honid, which is HONNID, and check out some of the drawing and illustration that you do there. It's just fantastic. Do you have a favorite subject that you like to tackle, or?
Probably clones. In recent days, I've been dealing with a little bit of art block because I think I've exhausted my clone stuff. But definitely clones. A little bit on that, I guess. Whenever I saw Attack of the Clones, not with my father, because Phantom Menace offended him greatly. He decided he didn't want to pick it up for VCR or anything. And, we left that theater in a big harumph. But I remember being kind of, I was really excited because it ends on such a high note. Anyway, side note over. One of 30 we're probably going to get into. But so Attack of the Clones, Tamora Morrison, a Maori man. I saw him, and as a little kid, I saw a Res uncle. We have Res uncles around here, people that whenever you're a kid, they look out for you. They have their eye on you. They give you advice. They give you rides. If it's just to go swim or whatever it is, they teach you to sing. They give you song. They give you a rattle and, encourage you to sing along. And, they're not family, but they are family. So in my head, whenever I saw Tamora Morrison, he looked, he had the look, he had the stance, he was stoic, and to me, he looked like a Res uncle. So as a little kid, I always thought that he was Mohawk. In my head, I always thought he was at least, Indigenous. And yeah, he is. And it's such an awesome thing to see. So my obsession, I guess, with clones is heavily rooted in that, the familiarity of, having those troopers around. And granted, yeah, they evolve into not the best thing, but seeing that as a little kid and then seeing episode 3 and Tamora taking that bucket off so many times, over a CG body, it still had such a huge influence on me because that was another anchor, a big anchor for my indigeneity. I felt was in the thing I was obsessed with. So yeah, clones for sure.
And then you have a OC named Clay. Can you tell us a bit about him?
I do. His name is Odala, which translates to clay. So in high school, I took a creative writing course, and it was me and mostly a bunch of girls talking about stuff and their feelings and these things. And I had written a Kwakyo spy that was kind of like a 007 character, and his entire goal was to hunt down perpetrators of the residential schools, and that evolved over time into Clay, my OC. I kept the name because I loved the idea of Odala. I love the idea of clay and the fact that it is so instrumental within our culture. And my middle name is Clay. I'm named after a Res uncle, actually, around here. His name's Clayton. He's a good friend of the family and helped my dad whenever he was in a lot of strife. So there's a lot of layers to the name itself. But yeah, Clay is a clone boy. He runs around. He has a knife. He do the shoot, the bang bangs. And his character and many of the OCs that surround him have indigenous names. They have Kinakahagan names. So you have Odala / Clay, who is my main OC, who I, through a long process of my indecision, finally made. Anyway, sorry. I'm just thinking of all the variations of Clay that I made before I finalized it after talking with Kayla. Clones Deserve Better. She's good people and helped me through that process. She made many OCs within the clone community for sure. And yeah, since then I've been envisioning, as all OC creators do, a story, a comic book, a whole saga of events that surround Clay. And many of his compatriots have indigenous names. So there's Jeeks, who translates to fly. Ogwali, the older, more grizzled brother to Clay that teaches him a lot, his name translates to bear. So I kind of wanted to have him have that warmth whenever I'm writing him in my stories, and that protective nature. But yeah, it's a big old nerdy romp. So many layers and so many details, but yeah.
One detail I love is Clay's clone trooper number is what is it?
CT 1491.
Yeah.
the year before.
Yeah. Because it's funny because this week I finally got above 1,500 followers on Instagram, and it felt like forever. I was just stuck at 1,492, and I'm like, come on, just can people just can 8 people just help me out? I don't want to be at 1,492.
Yeah.
So summary of what we were kind of talking about is, if you're not following Hooney on Instagram, you should get on that, and he has some great clone artwork, and
thank you
great artwork. So,
and side note, sorry, I just realized that I have it marked down on the calendar. Clay turns a year old on June 24th, so that should be a good time. I'm gonna try and do draw this in your style type thing.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, he's come a long way since then. And I really love seeing all the interpretations and artwork that people in the community have made as a tribute to him, because I was so indecisive and in my own head about it, as I usually am about all decisions and all things. And yeah, I'm really happy to see that the clone community, the art community, the Star Warsy fandom on Instagram has really taken to it. And so many people enjoy my artwork and stick around whenever I talk about heavier issues within indigeneity. So yeah, give me a follow. More nerdy stuff, and then potentially heavy stories.
Absolutely. All right, well, why don't we take a quick break, and then we'll be back and talk about the Tusken Raiders. But before we go, I wanted to remind everyone that our merchandise store is open. We've got some t-shirts in there. We've got hats featuring the Ebon Hawk logo on there. Those are pretty cool. And we just had our pins released recently, and those turned out really great. So definitely go check those out. The links to the merchandise store are in our Instagram bios, or you can go to ebonhawkpodcast.square.site and check that stuff out for yourself.
Alrighty, so today we are talking about the Sand People, and as I kind of just replay Knights of the Old Republic, just to kind of prepare for this podcast and talk about it, I've really come to appreciate the layers of writing that BioWare put into their world building throughout the game, in Terrace, in Kashyyyk, and Tatooine, and many of the other worlds. And I was kind of just wow, there are mirrors for the Indigenous Experience, definitely in Kashyyyk, but also in Tatooine. And there are the Sand People on Tatooine, but they're also called the Tusken Raiders, and they've been around since A New Hope. What is your kind of view of the Tusken Raiders in A New Hope, Cooney?
They're loud. They're savage, and they have no humanity. They are a representation of the savage Indian that is shown in a lot of the early John Wayne movies, and this is heavily where Lucas took his inspiration. Was Stagecoach, and a lot of those other older westerns. You see Tatooine, and I really see a frontier. For all the content that it shows up in, it is always portrayed as a frontier. It is portrayed as a land of nomads, desolate and dry. People are scrounging for just the basics, just for water. And the Sand People within A New Hope are portrayed as, they're very savage. They come in, they don't really have any words. They scamper away whenever Obi-Wan shouts at them in any version that you watch. And they're very, very surface level. And they carry that connotation, that savage Indian imagery with their gaffy sticks and the screeching. And they're made to be very inhuman. And they're very, very, even with the sounds that they make, it sounds like a pig, it sounds like a dog, it sounds like a donkey. And either way you spin it, I feel like that is a commentary on Indigenous language, because it sounds so foreign in our mouths to, anybody looking on. And yeah, it feels like a critique if you dig deep enough on those. Well, I guess the critique will come a little bit later, but it feels like a commentary, a tribute, and an homage to those old westerns, and the danger of, I guess, nature as they're represented within the nature of Tatooine.
Yeah, they kind of just tussle with Luke, and you don't really get any depth from them. They're kind of just something Luke has to deal with, and kind of just forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something to be avoided, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then later on, they're kind of seen as more bodies to be taken down, right? They're an obstacle, but they're also a nameless, faceless, you don't feel too bad adversary, because they all appear so similar with their wrappings and their banthas and their gaffy sticks. They're just an ominous blob to do the pew-pews at.
Yeah, and Tatooine is definitely influenced kind of like by the Western films, I think, like by the Searchers, the John Wayne films. And yeah, you don't really get as much depth from the Tusken Raiders in A New Hope as like you would, as we do later in different Star Wars stories. But I'm trying to remember, do we see any Tusken Raiders in Return of the Jedi?
I don't think so. There might be like an audio cue whenever they're driving along in Jabba's sail barge, but I don't believe so. Yeah.
I think we might see some banthas.
Yeah, banthas for sure.
Someone's probably going to have a screenshot and be like, well, actually, you missed the Tusken Raider.
Yeah.
It's at this timestamp, and like, I think you guys are fake fans. And it's like, oh, sorry. All right. So... And you talked about how your dad's favorite Star Wars movie is The Phantom Menace, and
he loves it.
Yeah, and the Tusken Raiders do return in the Tatooine instances in The Phantom Menace, but they're kind of just shooting at pod racers. What is your take on that?
Okay, I kind of love their appearance in The Phantom Menace. I've been thinking about this a bit. I have my notes, as I mentioned, but I feel like so much of this I could just speak on. But in any culture, there exist teenagers. There are always teenagers. Teenagers that are going to go out and get into trouble. They're going to get into some wild things, and they're going to do a lot to just, impress the boys, as it is, impress their friends around them. So whenever I saw them in a Phantom Menace now as an adult, I feel like I had like a crotchety old man like reaction to them, because they're just hyping each other up. Like they hit one of the pods. I think they ding Anakin's pod, and yeah, he just raises his rifle, and all the rest of the boys just start howling with him, and they're just all so hyped and like, oh yeah, I got one. But yeah, it is so funny to think that these are the young warriors. These are the ones that are trying to like earn their place, but in their free time they're like, oh yeah, it's going down in the pod race, so let's get down there and maybe I can ding one this year, or maybe I can take one out, because it is such a fatal sport. It really doesn't matter, right? But yeah, that's what I think whenever I see that. Just a bunch of teens doing wild stuff with their friends and being a nuisance. But it's rooted in that, the invader narrative there as well. But yeah, I definitely just see a bunch of teenagers with guns just taking pot shots at these racers.
Imagine if one of them would have like taken out Anakin. It's like you actually kind of saved the galaxy a lot of heartache, I think. So I'm like,
Yeah.
You saved an entire village in like 10 years.
Yeah. And I'm like, I wonder, I was just kind of thinking that, and I was like, oh, actually, it's kind of a boon, I think. So, yeah. But in Attack of the Clones, I was rereading Skywalker, A Family at War by Kristen Baver. And one instance that kind of took me by surprise as I was reading it is, of course, like Anakin totally makes the wrong decision to take out his anger at losing his mother. But one thing she notes is that Klieg Lars says that they're mindless creatures, to Anakin beforehand. And like, I was kind of like, I wonder if Klieg Lars could have like had a more nuanced and open perspective, if like he could have like set up Anakin a bit more to like not just take out his anger on the Tusken village in Attack of the Clones. What do you think about that?
I think that goes into stereotypes. Anakin is coming from a society and a culture and a people that have grown with the Tuskens as a constant problem. That's the issue that you run into whenever you're going blood for blood and you forget where the blood started. The Tuskens are portrayed as savage. They are mindless. They are this, they are that. The Redskins, they are savage. They are mindless. They are bloodthirsty. I feel like that is the narrative that is going into this. And you have Anakin, a very, very powerful individual, looking for a fight, looking for something, to hurt after losing his mother. And granted, he always had that darkness within him, but the fact that he's already aware and already knows that his actions, whenever he tells the wider society that he belongs to, that he's done this overpoweringly evil act of killing children, of killing women, he erases a whole generation of Tusken Raiders, of people, with the fuel and the knowledge that he can go back home at the end of the day and his actions aren't really going to be judged, because, oh, great, good job, that's however many Tuskens or however many generation of people that we don't have to worry about. That's one less Redskin to worry about later down the line. And yeah, that's the scope that I see that through, is that he's coming in with the knowledge that his actions are still going to be seen favorably, even though he's on this huge blood rage and this murder spree. And within his community, and for generations since probably they earned the name Tusken Raider, it's been accepted. It's been okay to do such things, and it's celebrated. And yeah, that is definitely something that's within our own history that has been celebrated as well. But maybe we can get into that a little bit later.
Yeah. I mean, there's some deleted instances, I think, in the Revenge of the Sith script and maybe Attack of the Clones, like that the Tusken Raiders were paid off by Count Dooku to abduct Shmi Skywalker, and that is an interesting detail, but like at the end of the day, like if that was part of the canon, like they're just like what they were doing, they were cogs like in a machine, you know, like they weren't the ones endangering Shmi, you know, so
yeah.
But yeah, like no matter what Anakin did was wrong, and I don't like watching Attack of the Clones. You're not supposed to come out of that and being like, what Anakin did was okay. So, yeah. But when you kind of go back 4,000 years in the timeline to the Sand People and Knights of the Old Republic, I didn't realize this, but like they're called Sand People. They're not called Tusken Raiders, and just Sand People doesn't sound as like it's like Tusken Raider, isn't it like a name given to them by like the off-worlders, you know, like yeah. I was just like, oh, that's a good detail, because like they're one with the sand, one with the environment of Tatooine, and kind of getting more into it. They're trying to protect Tatooine, and I was like, oh, it's beautiful, you know.
A small note on the name situation as well. That is something that's reflected within Haudenosaunee culture, for sure. I'm curious what the Sand People would call themselves if they were to introduce themselves to, you know, the Offworlders as their own people. How would they self-identify? Because they never, they never, from my knowledge, and granted it is foggy, but from my knowledge, they never self-identify as Sand People, or, you know, it comes much later, but the Tusken Raiders and that. Because within our culture, the people of the Haudenosaunee were the people of the Longhouse. Ungwahue were the first people. But some traders came along, they spoke to the Huron, and they asked, oh, who are those people? Oh, they're the Iroquois. Oh, what does that mean? They're the meat eaters. They're the flesh eaters. They're cannibals. They're this, they're that. And it's a matter of perspective. And we're still called Iroquois today. We take that name on. But it was a jab by a nation that didn't have the best viewpoint of us. Now, granted, within our history, we have had some dark times, and that is addressed within the formation of our Iroquois Confederacy, within our history, and there's a larger story there, how that was solved, how that was dealt with, and times have changed, but I'm very curious what the Sand People would self-identify themselves as. And Sand People in general does sound like some kind of, you know, slur. It doesn't feel great to say if you're thinking of them as a people, as a nation, as a culture, as we have in the fandom and in the Disney era Star Wars content are beginning to shift and see them as a people, as a culture with a language. And so I'm curious, very, very curious how they would self-identify.
Yeah, part of me is like, oh, if I could just inject myself into the Star Wars timeline and like just kind of see like the Tusken Raiders like culture, their art, and like if they dance, like I would like to be invited, you know, like I would only want to see it like if they wanted me to see it, of course, but like I'm just like, oh, I want to like see it, because like there's so much more to them than just like, you know, than we see in A New Hope and in the prequels. But
yeah, for sure. Even in KOTOR, they mentioned, right, that there's the Tusken Raiders on the outskirts beyond Anchorhead are more hardened and more aggressive. And I'm curious if that, you know, if you look even deeper, if that's another nation, because you take out some of those raiders in that area, and the raiders within, you know, the Anchorhead area, they don't care, they don't mind. Like you're not an instant enemy to them. So I'm curious if that was another nation, another tribe. And within the movie, I think it would be really cool especially as like an artist myself, to address the differences between those cultures, those nations, because I'm sure that they have a shared identity if you step back, but I'm curious how they would differentiate themselves from the other nation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the storyteller does mention that the Sand People spread throughout Tatooine, so like I think that there would be many nations, many tribes of Sand People, or what we don't know what they call themselves yet. But to me, like Sand People sounds a little bit better than like Tusken Raider.
Yeah.
But yeah, like just kind of like different wrappings. Like, would it kind of be like different, like I don't know, just like different gaffy sticks and like I don't know, like.
I'm curious too. You could go regional with it. You could even have like the Tusken Raider or the Sand People that we're familiar with ride banthas, and they do this, they do that. But what if these, this alternate nation rode dewbacks? They hunted different things. They had different materials to work with, more abundant womprats, maybe, we don't know. But other things that they would see as important, and ways to earn your place and earn your, earn your warriorhood. But yeah, I think that would be really interesting for sure.
Yeah, and maybe one tribe is affiliated like with the crate dragon. Like Ooh. That would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, if you could get enough Tusken nations together, you could form like at least a 7-nation army.
Yeah. I do like that song.
So. I'm sorry, I was stewing on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, with Knights of the Old Republic, you get to make light and dark-sided choices. It is a RPG. With the dark side choice, I think you can just be like, I don't care. I'm just gonna take care of this village, get rid of them, and just take what I want because it's mine, And then the light-sided choice, I believe you get some moisture evaporators and give it to the Sand People's chief.
Yeah, someone in Anchorhead asks you if you can take the moisture evaporators out because they would like to have, a more, peaceful kind of negotiations. So you get to make, as the player, you get to make that choice. And I think in Knights of the Old Republic, that's probably the first time, if you do the light side, which is kind of the more canon view of Knights of the Old Republic, that's the first time, really, as an audience, you get to see any interaction with the Tusken Raiders or Sand People beyond, just being out in the desert, right, to avoid.
Yeah, I'd love to be, as we mentioned, just inserting ourselves into situations. I'd love to be a fly on the wall of BioWare whenever they were writing those stories, because can you imagine being handed like so many chunks of canon to just be like, all right, yeah, do what you want to do. And then because it's, so many thousands of years in the past, you have such free range to do that. And yeah, it was, it's a good time, like, especially to think about that, just like, oh, what would I do with a like chunk of history, chunk of Star Wars like that? It's exciting. But yeah, I think it's interesting as well that if you go the dark side route, you miss out on like an hour and a half of gameplay, of story, just by doing that one. Sure, you can make the argument, well, I farmed for XP, but there's so much content there that you miss out on if you just go the dark side route. And I think it's, the way I see it, it's like a commentary on knowledge and ignorance. You roll into the Tusken Enclave dressed as you are, they're just going to attack you automatically. You roll in Tusken, or dressed as a Tusken Raider, they take pause, they see you, but immediately they're interested. Like, okay, he's made the effort, or they've made the effort to sneak in here. Maybe he's important, maybe he's of some interest, and you immediately end up seeing the chieftain, and he is still upset to see you. It's still not the best day for him, but it's not you're not approached with blades immediately. You know, they're at your back, but they want to see what you're about.
Yeah. And like if you are respectful of their customs, you get a whole lot of great world building that I'm so happy that BioWare didn't just go like Tusken Raiders bad, kill them and star map leave, you know. The storyteller, if you trade the, I believe it's if you trade the Crate Dragon Pearl, you get a lot of in-depth like story and world building. What did you think about that, Huni?
I thought it was really cool. As I said on our last pod, I played this at my uncle's a whole bunch, and that was a story and a bit of the game that I think he might have just gone through and played on his own and told me to watch, and I was enthralled by it. It was crazy. It was really interesting because you're tasked by these, you know, Tusken Raiders, by these people. Impress us. Go out, prove yourself, come back, and then maybe, you know, we can connect with you further. They encourage you to do this stuff and go take out the Crate Dragon, and whenever you come back, they're like, oh, you did it. And maybe that was just a way for them to get rid of you in like a funny way. Like they're just gonna like, oh yeah, they're gonna go over to that nation's area, they're gonna get either taken out by the Crate Dragon, which obviously right away that's gonna happen, or they're gonna get taken out by our rival nation, and it can be, you know, maybe that would be a point of connection between the people. Like, yeah, you know, we sent those guys over. Oh yeah, we took those guys over. We took them out. Like, yeah, that's kind of funny. Anyway, we're gonna shoot each other now, or we're not. I don't know. But yeah, I found it really interesting because you learn so much about the history, the motive, and you know, so much about the Tusken Raiders and their history and how they came to be and why they're so apprehensive about outsiders and technology and that encroaching on their land and being so connected to the land after, you know, straying so far from it, and then, you know, kind of like Icarus coming straight back down into the sand, coming straight down into the dirt that became sand. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And I think it's one of the key, like, incredibly strong stories that are told within Star Wars that I really hope they canonize in some way. Maybe that will come in with the Kenobi series, because I know his book addressed some of that and having more unique Tusken Raiders and speaking from their perspective, which was really awesome to see and listen to. Audiobooks, artist. But yeah,
I really enjoyed that they stress that it's an oral history passed down for generations, that they tell each other face to face, because like oral history, like it can be so beautiful and sometimes like more truthful, you know, than just like people writing stuff down. And I just thought it was like whoever wrote this like backstory for the Tuskens, and like this is actually beautiful, you know, like it was like unprecedented lore and world building in my opinion. But just kind of like some of the basics of the story is like in ancient times, even before a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, that's not what they say, but there were not sand people because there wasn't sand. The world was green. We didn't need to have wrappings. And it's kind of like they built up such a technologically savvy civilization. They built up technology, they built up walls, and they were like, I want to like go to the stars, you know. But then the Rakatan Empire comes, and then the Rakatans were like the first, I guess, colonizers, and like the Rakatans kind of punished them, you know, like for trying to free themselves. So the Sand People broke the machines, and then the builders, the Rakatans, broke Tatooine, which in my mind kind of echoes Terrace, even though like they weren't really related, you know. The builders, the Rakatans left, but the climate was forever changed. So the Tusken Raiders would hide in the caves. But then the Sand People came out. They learned to respect nature and kind of populated Tatooine, and they're always going to be connected to Tatooine. But then outsiders came again, and they kind of looked like the Sand People before that happened. So I'm like, oh, that's fascinating, you know. But I guess like Jawas and Sand People might have been related at one point in time, you know. But what did you think of that story?
I really really liked it, and I really appreciate the tribute to indigenous cultures. And I saw a video that talked about how it was an Indian tradition as well. Whenever you have an oral history, the idea is that it is a living history. It doesn't live and die by, you know, old English words written in a book, in a text long ago, and, you know, respected and adhered to, and then adjusted much later on, like it was you know, oh, that was them then, but this is us now, so we're gonna readjust, rewrite. It's meant to be a living history. It's meant to be taken by each generation, understood, respected. And within Haudenosaunee culture, with our storytellers, it's encouraged that you keep the lesson, the teaching, the core of the story true. You can make embellishments where you want to, so long as it doesn't contradict that original story, it doesn't contradict that original lesson, because the idea is delivering that lesson in the best way that you can, or the most effective way that you can. So as a pseudo storyteller myself within my community, I've gone to schools, I've gone to our elementary schools, colleges, different campuses, and told our stories, told our legends, told our history, and respected the lessons therein, because I feel like since I was a kid, these are things that I've lived with, these are things that I've learned from, and had them as an approach to life. You know, you don't get too cocky, you're humble, you respect your elders, you respect your surroundings, you think, you listen before you act, things like that. So whenever I go to an elementary school these days and I tell stories that have boisterous characters, or, you know, larger than life villains, I act them out, influenced definitely by like movies these days. But there's a story in particular, Skundi Wundi and the Stone Giant, and I play those two like wrestlers whenever I'm telling the story to the kids. I play one like more like The Rock, and then the other maybe like John Cena. I don't know. I don't know wrestling. I reference it, but I don't know it. But I bring that bravado to the story, and I'm curious. You know, it's punishable by death, but I'm curious if there's other stories that the storyteller shares that are intended for the children, intended for the next generation, intended for those kids to grow up into the ideals, the morals, and the lessons of the Tusken Raiders. If there's things that they're told, you know, the little womp rat that could, or some kind of story. I don't know exactly what it would be, but we have parallels within our culture that we, you know, recognize are designed to teach us lessons. Some of them are, you know, don't stay out too late, or, you know, the hoof lady will get you, or don't stay out too late, or, you know, the witch dogs will get you. There's so many lessons of don't stay out late at night. But I'm also curious what the Sand People version of that is, and the fact that this storyteller is held in such high regard because he is their history, he is them, he is their identity, he is their past, he holds their future. Because I saw in some lore diving that I did that if a storyteller within a tribe, a nation, is killed or passes, that nation is doomed basically to collapse in on itself, because they don't have a living history anymore, they don't have an identity, and they're bound to be either destroyed by another nation or just implode on their own. So it's interesting that they're recognized, and I'm curious where BioWare's writers had their eyes for all this stuff, because I'm curious if they dove into my culture at all, or if it was mostly Indian influences, or again, I would love to be a fly on the wall, or just I don't know how old I was whenever this is being made, but just roll me in. let me talk at you guys. I want to see where your influences are.
Part of me is just like, as we kind of do these episodes, I'm like, I wonder what they were influenced by, like who was in the room, like where the detail came from. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if like that information's out there, and I'm kind of like, I want to figure it out. You bring up a lot of good points, and I like what you say about like you kind of wonder if there were stories for the children, because I mean, that's why we tell stories in the first place, really, is to prepare the next generation for what life is going to be, the lessons to learn, to be selfless rather than selfish, how to grow up, how to become an adult, how to do good. And
I'm curious what their with their relationship to the banthas as well, right? They're given a bantha whenever they're young, and then the bantha that they have, they grow with and care for. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit later on whenever we talk about The Mandalorian. But I'm Definitely. Curious what the storyteller would have told them about, the little bantha that could, or the little bantha that, saved its master. There's definitely some parallels within Haudenosaunee culture with a particular story about a hunter and his 4 dogs that I feel like would be a good parallel and good lesson for those children. Because we respect our dogs within our culture, and I have a little dog named Darman, and he is very old now, and he is a layabout, and I can't wait for him to just have all gray hairs and just slump on the couch. But I'm curious about that.
I wonder if there used to be a whole lot more banthas before the outsiders came. But
So that's going to wrap up part 1 of our conversation with Huni. Be on the lookout in the future for part 2 of our conversation, where we talk a little bit more about Tusken Raiders, Star Wars, and the parallels with the Indigenous Experience. Thanks again to Huni for joining us, and be on the lookout for part 2 in the future. Thanks.
And you can find us on Instagram at Ebon Hawk Podcast.
And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram. It's at astro_droid_. The Ebon Hawk can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as everywhere else that Anchor podcasts are distributed. Subscriptions, reviews, and shares help us out.
Our intro and outro themes were composed by Alistair Schurman at alistairsounds.wixsite.com/Alistair Sounds. Our transition music was composed by Christian Walker at christianwalkermusic.com. This episode of the Ebon Hawk Podcast has been brought to you by Nikki Dog from Patreon. May the Force be with you. We will be back soon. Bye for now.